What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. There's a ton of mystery right now around what Sony's first-party studios are working on, but a recent filing that was discovered from Sony Interactive Entertainment may at least shed some light as to what's going on over there, and we're going to go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a long-lost Nintendo game from the 90s that's not only been recovered, but also released for anyone to play right now. And we'll also be taking a look at some of the comments from Immortals of Aveum's developer, who actually brought up, once again, the viability of single-player, big-budget games in today's market. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, for all members of the channel, Newswave is available early and ad-free. If you want to learn more about becoming a member for the channel, click the join button below this video. And we're going to start today with IGN and an event that they've announced that seems to be set up to fill the void, or at least attempt to fill some of the void left from the absence now of E3 going forward. And we can see this posted up over on the IGN website. And this is IGN Live, an in-person fan event in LA this June. They say it's going to include world-class talent, parties, networking opportunities, and unique attractions from a curated list of leading exhibitors across gaming and entertainment. It will have tournaments, first looks at new releases, panels featuring headliners from games, television, movies, and more. I don't really know if there's any E3 level announcements here necessarily, but it's not surprising that I'm sure many different companies will attempt to do something around this time. Obviously, there'll be a Summer Game Fest. We see this with IGN. I don't know if any big publishers are going to attempt to have their own show, like EA might do EA Live or Ubisoft Forward. I assume these things will just take place throughout the year, like we kind of saw sort of last year happen. But still, I am expecting at least Summer Game Fest, and I guess something here from IGN. So we'll see how this one turns out, because if it goes well, maybe it's something that could actually expand a bit more and turn into a yearly event that we can look forward to, or it'll just be a smaller IGN event where they have a bunch of parties. Also, after the recent showing for Silent Hill 2 in that Sony State of Play, there was a lot of feedback that wasn't great for what was shown, and it does appear that the president at Bloober team has heard this and actually told us exactly who was to blame for this. We can see this posted up. This is over on Eurogamer's website here with the translation. This again from the president of Bloober Team Studio. Says, I wrote those negative comments myself, kind of joking about it, but quite seriously, we are not responsible for the marketing side. Our partner, Konami, is entirely responsible for this. This trailer certainly does not reflect the spirit of the game, which is... It's very strange, by the way, because you feel like the trailer should show the game in the best possible light, but based on what they're saying here, Konami just didn't for some, or they didn't convey exactly what the game is going to play like, or a lot of the stuff was around the combat of what was shown. So maybe the game is way different than what they had in that trailer. If so, Konami really needs to get that one sorted out, whether it's communication as to what should be shown and that's what it's, again, strange stuff here. Bloober team kind of calling out Konami a bit, or at least the president was. So I guess the next trailer, we'll see if things get any better when it comes to just representing what they're doing here with Silent Hill 2. Oh, and it looks like Princess Peach Showtime, which is out next month, will be using Unreal Engine. Well, at least that's according to some box art shots. This is, by the way, posted up over on X from Ek Family, saying the back of the Chinese display box of Princess Peach Showtime looks like it uses Unreal Engine as well, just like Pikmin 4, which is interesting to see Nintendo continue to use Unreal Engine. Just kind of getting familiar with it, I guess, and especially going into next generation, and we've seen that Unreal Engine can help to kind of accelerate development time. I mean, it's an entire engine with all the tools and stuff already kind of built out and available, and they continue to upgrade and evolve going forward. So it seems like Nintendo is at least keeping that in mind with some of their projects. Not their big, like, it's not for Zelda or Mario, at least not yet, but things like Pikmin or Princess Peach Showtime makes sense. You might want to use an engine like that, obviously to get familiar with it, but also make sure it's not some crazy long bloated development time. And I'll be curious to see how this one turns out, because Pikmin 4 actually looked really good on the Switch using it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a filing from Sony Interactive Entertainment. It might give us an idea, at least somewhat, as to what any of these different first-party studios are working on. So we can see this is posted up over on X from Gamatsu, saying Sony Interactive Entertainment trademarks Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet in the United States. So because this is under Sony Interactive Entertainment, it leads us to believe that this would be a game, I guess, from PlayStation. It could also be different events or things in these games that they would want to trademark, although Intergalactic, that kind of sounds like it could be a title for a game. But then it goes on with a Heretic Prophet. That seems like a bit of a, I don't know, maybe a title that's a bit too long. But I guess if the main title is just Intergalactic, okay, I could see that. Now, there are many studios, as I mentioned before, that people are just trying to figure out what exactly is going on. Think of Naughty Dog, which has been in the news a lot, not for anything really great recently, as while people did seem to get a kick out of the roguelike mode, the survival mode that was added to Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. Still a remaster, not maybe the big Last of Us multiplayer, Last of Us Online game, right? That being canceled. So people are, of course, looking to Naughty Dog for whatever their new intellectual property is that they're currently working on. Then you also have Sony Santa Monica, same deal there. Apparently they are working on a new intellectual property. Bend Studio, we know they're working on something new. And then Bluepoint, same deal. While we still kind of look at Bluepoint as the remake or remaster studio, seems like they're off to their own original project here too. So looking at this, I mean, Intergalactic, obviously that kind of speaks to more of the sci-fi vibe, and apparently both Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica could be working on sci-fi games, although again, Bend Studio, kind of up in the air, really no idea what they're doing, or Bluepoint. So I would kind of look at this, and if I had to take a guess right now for Intergalactic, I kind of feel like that might be Naughty Dog's game. And seeing a filing like this gives me hope that maybe it's something that they'll be showing this year, because really Naughty Dog I feel like they need a win, and if they can show a really interesting looking game, a new intellectual property that people can get on board with, even if it's a couple of years out, at least it'll be like, okay, that's what Naughty Dog is working on. It's not another remaster that doesn't actually need a remaster. But hey, Sony Santa Monica, same deal there, although I feel like they should be still sticking with God of War, because there is, I think, still some stuff they can build on top of after Ragnarok. Who knows, maybe they want to try something new, but that's kind of where we are right now with Sony. It's like any of these big first-party studios could be working on this Intergalactic game or anything else, because there's just so much that's unknown currently, and it's not really normal right now for Sony to have so much being a mystery. So I'm hoping we see some kind of showcase from Sony here, maybe around May or June, around that typical kind of E3, not E3 time now, but just start setting things up really for the second half of the PlayStation 5's lifespan. And, well, you would definitely want to start including some of these big-time first-party studios that we assume have been working on games for years now. Next up, let's talk about a long-lost Nintendo game that has now been recovered and actually released to the public to start playing actually right now. And this originally came from Did You Know Gaming with this video here, which is titled The Lost F-Zero Games Are Restored and Playable. A few days later, many of the other news outlets started picking it up and writing out sort of the explanation as to how this whole thing started, and concluded now with really the patch for these games being released over on archive with .org. Now, the idea here is we have the Satelleview, which was an add-on attachment for the Super Famicom in Japan, and it would pull stuff from servers, and in this case, it would pull F-Zero Grand Prix, or BS F-Zero Grand Prix. And because these were all digital, you guessed it, they were kind of lost to time. There were ways to kind of save it onto certain cartridges, but you can kind of do the math and be like, well, okay, there probably weren't many Satelleviews out there in the first place. Then you have to bank on the fact that somebody kept their cartridge with that saved on it. And in fact, right now, there's still a $5,000 bounty in place, apparently, for anyone who can source the original BSX carts. So, hey, if you're out there with it, there's a $5,000 payday with your name on it there. But what's really interesting about this entire thing is they did release it as a patch for really just F-Zero. So if you get the F-Zero ROM, right, and you take the patch files, you can then apply it and you'll be able to play a bunch of different tracks and things that were exclusive to the Satelleview version. And in fact, looking at the README for the patch notes here for BS F-Zero Grand Prix, they have 2 different weeks, as that's how it worked with Satelleview. They'd kind of be scheduled out for different weeks and it would stream the information directly to your Super Nintendo or Super Famicom and cartridge. But like, for example, Forest 1, Big Blue 2, Sandstorm 1, Forest 2, Silence 2, then moving up to week 2, Mute City 4, Forest 3, Sandstorm 2, Metal Fort 1, Metal Fort 2. So there is quite a bit of content here to experience, most likely for many people for the first time. So yeah, I would go check this out and definitely take a look at Did You Know Gaming's video, as they did a good job sort of outlining the entire process, how it got done, and then the end result, which is, yeah, you can play the game right now on an emulator, or I guess technically on real hardware. I haven't tested it myself, but I guess it should match up, since you're just patching one of these ROM files. Just might have to use one of those flash carts on a Super Nintendo to make it happen. Next up, let's talk about the Splatoon 3 DLC side order, as it did get a bunch of details yesterday, as well as the release date. Now, this DLC is included in that expansion pass, but we can see some of the trailer here. It's coming out February 22nd, and from what I could tell, it's basically a roguelike mode. Now, the idea here is you go up this tower or spire of order. There's different floors, and you clear objectives on each floor. They showed like rolling a ball kind of up a hill, or just eliminating all the different enemies. And as you go floor by floor and you clear them, you'll get these color chips, and they provide enhancements for your character. So your rate of fire is faster, damage output, that sort of thing. And there's over 60 types of color chips. And of course, if you die, you have to start over from the beginning of the tower, unless you reach the top of it and technically complete it. But your color chips will convert to pearls. These can be spent then for permanent upgrades. So this does sound like a lot of fun, and I'm noticing we're getting more and more of these roguelike modes, by the way. Like, I just obviously just finished up with God of War Ragnarok with Valhalla, and then I see this come out. We just had The Last of Us Part 2 remaster, where we had the survival. So it's just kind of sweeping the gaming landscape right now with some of these different add-ons. I mean, even Returnal had kind of like a tower mode sort of too. So I don't know, this seems like it would fit in really, really nicely here with Splatoon 3. I heard some people who had a chance to play it early mentioned like comparisons to Hades, but I do like that they didn't just try to kind of do the same sort of thing with Splatoon. They genuinely try to take a chance here and make it a bit different with the kind of the roguelike twist on it. So seems like an awesome idea, and I'm sure many Splatoon fans out there are excited to jump into this one. Again, that coming out February 22nd. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Immortals of Aveum. This came out last year from Ascendant Studios, and unfortunately, it didn't do very well at all. In fact, I was playing through it, and I didn't know anyone else who was. And to be honest, I kind of picked it up just to give some of my thoughts in the different podcasts and stuff we were doing at the time. I don't know if I would have necessarily if I wasn't doing that. But, I mean, it was described as Call of Duty with magic. And yeah, that's kind of how it played. It was genuinely a unique experience. It just wasn't one that was really appealing to many people out there at the time. It was also pretty crowded last year, but it looks like we have some more details and some reasoning as to maybe why it didn't do so well. We already heard from the CEO at Ascendant Studios kind of blaming the idea of it just kind of being crowded, but this was from an anonymous employee and developer at Ascendant Studios talking with IGN. We can see this posted up though. This is over on Games Radar. This from that anonymous employee saying, at a high level, Immortals was massively overscoped for a studio's debut project. The development cost was around $85 million, and I think EA kicked in $40 million for marketing and distribution, so $125 million budget for this game. Whew. Sure, there was some serious talent on the development team, but trying to make a AAA single-player shooter in today's market was a truly awful idea, especially since it was a new IP that was also trying to leverage Unreal Engine 5. What ended up launching was a bloated, repetitive campaign that was far too long. And I'll push back a little on that. I don't know if it felt competitive necessarily. You go through the game and they change up a lot of the environments. They have a lot of different story beats. And I mean, there are puzzles and other things to go along with sort of the shooting and magic casting that they do at least change up with different abilities and different skills you get along the way. And there's a whole progression system and like different weapons and that sort of thing. So I don't know if it's necessarily the repetition. I will say they're absolutely correct in that it was overscoped, or just, it seems like it got way too big for their debut project, especially at $125 million. Now, sure, $40 million was for marketing, and we did see it at a lot of events, to the point where I was like, man, we've seen Immortals of Aveum like 4 or 5 times this year at all these different events. Jeff Keighley seemed to have it every single time at any event he was running. But the idea of a single-player, first-person shooter game not fitting in currently, I don't think that's correct, because we've seen plenty of single-player games do well. Last year, there were a whole bunch of them that actually sold really, really well. I just think the idea of Immortals of Aveum, again, Call of Duty with magic, wasn't necessarily clicking, and it being a new IP that I just don't think was that appealing to many people when it was first shown, and then shown again, and then shown again. Eventually you realize, okay, this isn't catching on. Let's regroup and figure this out. To their credit, they did delay it. Still wasn't enough, so unfortunately, it kind of got ran over by a bunch of other games that were more familiar or were sequels, and that's sort of it. So I will agree on one end, yeah, it's very risky right now to do these big budget games for the first time, like as your first debut project over $100 million. It's just, you're setting yourselves up to really fail at that point and struggle. Better to start smaller, get things figured out, and then kind of build up from there. And before we go to the comments of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. We're asked, if you were Nintendo, which series would you have ready to go with a new game to launch the next system with? A 3D Mario game. I mean, that's the tried and true, that's the classic. That's the Nintendo 64 approach. You have a big new 3D Mario game ready to go. Mario Kart coming in at second, Zelda at third. I'm surprised Pokemon was so far down the list. You feel like Pokemon being this massive IP, you'd have it ready to go and it would just sell a ton of systems alongside of it. And then Smash Brothers at the bottom. See, I would actually flip 3D Mario and Mario Kart, although I would prefer to have a new 3D Mario game because I just think I would have more fun with that. Although I guess Mario Kart is, who knows what new concepts they could come up with that one, but I feel like a 3D Mario game would be awesome to see right away on new hardware. And again, it's worked well for Nintendo in the past to sell systems, so yeah, why not launch with a new 3D Mario, but hard to argue with the success of Mario Kart and what it could do for the system day one. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day, as you can see here. We're gonna start with Chill, who says, I had a dream they announced Banjo 3E on Thursday. One can only dream. Now, I would not expect a new Banjo game to be announced on Thursday or tomorrow on Thursday, but you might be able to take away at least one thing from this this podcast that they're going to have. The idea that they would be open to releasing Banjo as a multi-platform game might be a way for them to justify putting a bigger budget behind it, or just greenlighting it in general, right? Because they can look at that and say, okay, Game Pass game on Xbox, but we'll sell it like full price on PlayStation and on Nintendo system. Or, all right, maybe it's like a more budget-oriented game. Who knows how far they would go with Banjo? But I think when they start opening up those sorts of IPs to other systems, they can say, hey, you know what? I feel like we can get our money back on this initially, and then also maybe drive people to Game Pass and Xbox. So if you want some of those, I don't say niche, but smaller kind of games that you don't necessarily think would explode up the sales charts just on Xbox, really just on one platform, you should be pushing for this because you will get more, I guess, creative, off-the-wall ideas. There's more of a safety net if you can sell to everyone, basically. And we'll finish up with a comment from the members-only video. We can see this. This one was from Sebastian. Says, Clever pushes their numbers on their podcast, and why not? It's a hobby we spend hours on daily, and they spend their whole life serving it, so why not have the info in a 2-hour podcast? I feel like there's going to be a lot of discussion back and forth as to, like, there's gonna be a lot of explanations, I think, in this podcast that they're gonna have, and probably a lot of things I'm sure people who are really into Xbox don't want to hear, and then some things they do, and it's gonna be a lot of back and forth, so maybe that is why they're going in a podcast format. It's just, honestly, it's what a lot of people have become accustomed to in the gaming space at this time, and maybe it's more of a laid-back environment where they can break bad news, but also present good news. So we'll see what they have for us tomorrow. I am very curious as to what they show up with. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Whether it's intergalactic, which studio from Sony do you think would be working on this? Or do you think it's something other than a brand new game? And then also, what about the Satelleview F-Zero game that's been recovered and released? Or are you going to try out all these new tracks for the game? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.